You are listening to Proof Text, a Glossa House podcast exploring Scripture and all things related to it. New episodes are released daily. For more information, check out glossahouse.com and subscribe to our channels on Spotify and YouTube. Welcome and enjoy.
Hello and welcome to Proof Text and Glossa House TV. I am Michael Halcomb, and today I'm excited to have with me Jeremy Tate. And this is sort of the first time we're connecting, so I'm pleased to meet you and get to know you. And I'm looking forward to hearing some of your story and some of the great things that you've got going on. So how about we just start there? Tell us a little bit about who you are, where you're at, and kind of what you're up to, and then we'll see where the conversation goes.
Sure. Yeah, Michael, great to connect with you. My name, again, is Jeremy Tate. I'm in Annapolis, Maryland, and I'm in the education reform movement, or what you call the classical renewal movement. And I'm the CEO of a company called the Classic Learning Test. So we're an alternative to the SAT and ACT. So you may think, man, standardized testing, who cares? What could get more boring than standardized testing? But it actually acts as a really powerful lever that in some ways drives curriculum at the secondary level, even at the K-8 level as well.
Yeah. So you've ventured into the testing sector. That does, I mean, for most people, I think you're right. Like, that probably sounds pretty boring, but I think there's more to it than just we're a third option, right? We're another test. And so I was like reading through your cltexam.com website. I was just poking around there recently, and one of the things that you're saying is that after standardized tests, students should leave feeling inspired and enriched, rather than like, oh, that was terrible. Now that's a completely different angle to come at testing than almost anyone seems to come at testing.
Yeah, it's incredible how bad most of what they put on standardized tests is, and what it has been for decades. It's like they look for the most boring, painful passage that nobody would ever read if they weren't taking the standardized test. And part of the reason this happened, Michael, is because we had a movement in standardized testing, kind of the sensitivity movement that started back in the late 90s. And it's not all bad. It started with the idea of saying, look, if a student has some trauma, maybe an uncle committed suicide or something, you wouldn't want to have a reference to that on a standardized test because it would be triggering, traumatic for the student. You wouldn't even get an accurate score. And that's all fine, right? But it's gotten totally crazy now, where there's a lot of standardized testing companies now that even referring to a boy or a girl assumes cisgender normality or something, and that is therefore triggering. So we've gotten totally carried away with this whole thing, very ideological. So we're just like, wait a minute, let's go back to the basics. Let's put students in front of the very best of what has been thought and said. And it's been very popular.
Excellent. So let's venture there for a minute, and we'll keep circling back, I'm sure, to the CLT. What's going on with education right now? I mean, when you look at preschool all the way up through higher ed, even doc and postdoc situations, the education. I'm a professor as well, so so I see this firsthand. There are a number of things going on. The ideological stuff on the one hand that you were mentioning, in terms of like human sexuality, and gender ideology, but then we also have now AI, which is a real issue, and we're seeing that at the high school level, and certainly in college classroom. It's something I've had to deal with the last few semesters. And one person, in fact, one of my students decided last semester that they no longer wanted to be a student in college if they couldn't use AI. Uh, and so just quit college over that.
Yeah,
So we're seeing some crazy stuff, but we have also on our college campuses, man, we're seeing the Gaza Israel stuff. So what is happening in education, like from where you sit?
sure. Yeah. I mean, Michael, I think we're living through it. Like we're being ushered into by incredibly powerful forces and incredibly powerful tech forces primarily, kind of into Huxley's Brave New World, where young
Yeah,
people are primarily controlled through pleasure and entertainment, and to get into any situation in the real world where I'm currently reading Jonathan Haidt's not the Coddling of the American Mind, the one that just came out, The Anxious Generation, which is a really
yes,
powerful read. And
yeah,
yeah, I think that we're being ushered into a whole new world. I think in really rapid speed. Is that what you sense as a professor as well?
yeah, I think so. It's I think when students come to college, they're certainly still impressionable. I think they're maybe still more impressionable, or a lot more impressionable these days when they get to college than maybe they were 10 or 15 years ago.
Uh huh.
Um, um, but they have all these forces sort of, like descending upon them. You're mentioning sort of like a technocratic, um, sort of weight that just like looms over them. They constantly, as Jonathan Haidt talks about, social media and how that sort of rewired like an
Yeah.
entire generation and made them anxious. So you have like that social media stuff, and I have this will be interesting to sort of just tangent on because I have two high school children. One's going to
Mm-hmm.
be a senior, just turned senior, and then
Nice.
one's going into 10th, and neither of them have social media, at least so far as
Good.
I
Good
know.
on you, Dad. Good on you. Well done. Well done.
Yeah, and I see other children at that age who certainly are hooked on it, and like the depression and the anxiety that comes with that, right?
Yeah.
Just I was talking to my daughter a while back about, imagine you're on social media and you see all your friends are at a party, but you realize that you didn't get invited. Like, how do you feel in that moment? And she
Yeah.
realized, oh, I feel terrible. And so would you rather see that and feel terrible, or just not know? you know
Mm-hmm.
just, I'd rather not know. And so she's missing some of that stuff that's happening, in friend groups and peer groups, but I don't think to the detriment of her. I think for
Yeah.
for the betterment of her, in fact.
Yeah, I just keep thinking about this analogy that I use in the book, and because I've been thinking about this for years, right? And so, if a young person goes to, let's say you're from Japan, and when you're 12 years old, you move to America. Well, within a few years, you're actually going to sound American. There's not even going to be an accent by the time you're in your early 20s. Nobody's going to know that you grew up in Japan, right? There's kind of a complete rewiring that happens. But if you wait
Hmm.
until, 16 or 17, it's impossible to ever shake the accent. Something really
Right.
deep of kind of hard wiring is happening during that time. And if you hardwire people onto social and big tech platforms for that dopamine hit and whatnot, it has lifelong implications.
Absolutely, that's a great analogy. I really like that. So say a little more about the book that you're referencing.
So yeah, so again, the book, this is Jonathan Haidt. The book is The Anxious Generation, and the cutoff year is 1996. And so
Right.
1996, he's making a case that this is the first generation that kind of grows up on the iPhone. And he
Yeah.
chronicles what he called, the transition from a play-based childhood, which is what I had, which is what you had, to a
Yep.
phone-based childhood. And this really wrong priority that so many parents have had, where they have overestimated the dangers in the real physical world, but they've underestimated the dangers on the online world.
Oh,
And
that's
so,
great. Yeah.
yeah, people say, no, you can't go out to the bonfire. They're going to be drinking beer. You can't go down the street to the bonfire. No way. So the kid stays home. They stay in their bedroom where, look, there's a bunch of predators. It's go down to the bonfire where they're drinking beer. It's way better. Right? I mean,
That's interesting. I was just talking with my daughter yesterday. Was driving her to a meetup with her friends and dropping her off, and um, she was lamenting the fact that because they just got out of school, and it's like the first full week out of school, and she was lamenting the fact that a couple of the friends, or one in particular, uh, just flakes out on everything, right? Just like doesn't really want to do anything. And I was saying, like, man, your childhood, like, it's so different than like how I grew up. We were out playing basketball, and I'm not trying to be like that. Oh, we walked 2 miles uphill in the snow, kind of like that
yeah,
kind of thing. But the reality is it's so different. It's so different.
yeah.
We were playing basketball. I lived in a trailer park growing up.
Mm-hmm.
We had kids all over. When it snowed, we go out and shovel the basketball courts. The nets were frozen, and we're still literally shooting basketball. And that the idea of a play based versus phone based, I think that is a reality.
Yeah.
It is so different. And so it was good. Like I dropped them off. They went to the bowling alley and then had dinner together, and then my son had a team basketball game. So there still is some of that play, yet it's still very different. Yeah.
Yeah, for sure.
Um, so let's talk a little bit. I see these sort of cultural trends. We had our kids in classical Christian schooling. I used to teach in a classical school
Okay.
here in Hawaii. So we had our kids in that until there was sort of a major fallout
I
at the
think I've heard
school.
there's only one. Is that accurate?
Yeah, and that's probably the one that I was working at, and there was just a major fallout, and
Hmm.
uh, there was sort of no coming back from things that went down. So we've had our kids then in a sort of a Christian college prep school, which has been great academically.
Yeah.
Um, but I have missed elements of the classical Christian model. Um, I noticed, by the way, that yours isn't CCLT; it's just CLT. So,
Yeah.
is primarily what you're doing? Does it have a Christian sort of vibe or component to it, or is it's sort of going a different direction? I was reading and I noticed like you refer to the three transcendentals and stuff like goodness, truth, beauty, and all that good stuff. But yeah, so tell us a little bit about um, CLT in relation to the classical Christian movement or other
Yeah.
classical movements and those sorts of things.
Yeah. CLT, I mean, we've never, said that we're a quote unquote Christian test. I think what we're trying to do is to be even handed to the Catholic Christian intellectual tradition, in that this was a tradition that created the university. This is what the tradition that in many ways build what we know and call the West just in general, right? And what we see on the SAT and ACT is they actually censor this great tradition. And so they're not going to have, Thomas Aquinas. They're not
Mm.
going to have, somebody like Martin Luther. These were big, powerful voices, right? That drove the development of history and culture in the Western world, right, for centuries and centuries. And so this is just straight up shameless discrimination that SAT and ACT. I remember I was meeting with a college, Michael, years ago, and I was making a case for CLT, and they looked at it and they said, "Look, we can't have kids taking a college entrance exam with people like C.S. Lewis and John Paul II on it." They actually said this. And I said, well, why not? These are two of the greatest intellectuals of the entire 20th century. Why can't we have a college entrance exam? And they're just living under a mode of thinking where it's just okay. You just get to discriminate against people of faith. And so I think at CLT, we're trying to be honest and say, look, if you're a Christian, that's your faith. But look, if you're a dogmatic atheist, that's kind of your faith as well,
Yeah.
and we're not going to favor one of these worldviews over another.
Hmm. Hmm. So what you started in 2015, so you're almost a decade into this. What
Yeah.
what what gains have you seen? Like what strides have been made?
Yeah, it's been pretty wild. The first test ever, it's kind of embarrassing. We had 46 kids nationwide, the whole country. 46 kids took the first CLT, June 11th, 2016. This year we'll have well over a quarter million kids test with us. Now you can take the CLT to get into Florida State, the University of Florida, Hillsdale, some of the best colleges in the country. So it continues to just grow in popularity. And I think one of the reasons is that students actually care, right? Students are very interested in the human capacity for good, the human capacity for evil. We all have kind of an intuitive sense that we ought to read the best of what has been thought and said, right? We know we ought to read the classics, even if we don't, right? And so I think students enjoy that. And I think they're gravitating to the CLT in big numbers, because of that. We've got a great academic board. It's about 70 strong or so. And so, one of the things at CLT, we didn't try to do this, but it kind of just happened. So we're trying to pick this fight with the education establishment, the College Board, the ACT. And to do that, we wanted to get everyone in the classical renewal movement behind it. You could be Catholic school, you could be homeschool, you could be classical charter, classical Christian school. But for your main kind of pinnacle test assessment, do you want that to be the secular progressive, Common Core aligned college board test? Or do you want it to be something that would reflect the education of a place like Hillsdale College? Or of a place like Thomas Aquinas College or Grove City or Christendom or UD, one of these great institutions. So, and they've been really excited to put their name behind it. We bring everybody together in Annapolis every year for the CLT Higher Ed Summit, and it's been a great way. It's pretty incredible, Michael, to think back on, but so much of this happened uncoordinated, right? Around the same time, you have schools like the Logos School in Moscow, Idaho, and Care Paravel, and on the Catholic side, Mother Divine Grace homeschooling. A lot of these launching without any awareness. The others were doing the same thing, and they were launching around a similar time. And now these different streams have kind of come together into this river that's just picking up power and speed. And now people are like, what is that? That's a movement now, right? It is. It's a whole movement. It's beautiful. I think I'd put it this way. I mean, if you think about this just as a hypothetical question, what would the impact on education be? Let's just assume that the SAT and the ACT, they both changed their test. And primarily what students are doing at that point is everybody knows that on the SAT and ACT, they're going to see Aristotle. They're likely to see Plato's Republic. They're likely to see something from maybe Boethius or Shakespeare, maybe Flannery O'Connor in the modern world, or Dorothy Sayers, right? An MLK passage that isn't cherry-picked, that actually includes his philosophy and theology. If everybody knew that those were the college entrance exams, what would the impact be on education overall, right? And my gut is that even the pragmatic parent who doesn't really think about first principles, doesn't really think about education, they just want their kid to get into UPenn. Well, to get into UPenn or to get into Harvard, you've got to take this test. It's having you read Aristotle. So where should you send your kid? What kind of education should they get to do well, right? So this is an incredibly powerful tool, we believe, to reshape K-12 education around the great books.
So where, as you look ahead, like you look at the moment, do you have any hunches for where you think education in general is going? I guess on the one hand and on the other, like uh, I'm wondering how the sort of classical movement responds to that. Does it conform to that? Is it like a bulwark against that? Like, so yeah, where do you kind of see trends in education going, and then how does
Hmm.
this classical movement respond?
Yeah. Yeah, I think there's a lot of trends in education, and I think one of the trends that we're seeing is thinking through. AI is forcing us to everyone to think about first principles in education. And what are we doing? If AI can
Yeah,
do things that we never imagined a decade ago, teachers would say, well, one thing computers can't do for you is write. Oh, to the contrary, right? And now it's getting better and better and better, right? And so
right.
I think that in a smart AI world, the things that continue to be uniquely and distinctly human are going to be the differentiators. What are you going to do? Go to college and learn coding? Computers can code, right? Um, I think it's going to be anchored in tradition, ethically formed. When I look for employees, I hire big out of places like Hillsdale, Patrick Henry, a little homeschool college, primarily because they're ethically grounded. They know they're getting paid for 40 hours of work, so they're going to work 40 hours. And so I think employers are going to continue to see that the moral, ethical formation students are receiving is going to be the great differentiator, not necessarily the stuff they're learning, the knowledge that's downloaded or transmitted. That part's going to be even more important.
Hmm. It's interesting. Have you read Rod Dreher's Benedict Option? You
I
familiar with that?
have, yes, for sure.
Yeah.
What are your
You know,
thoughts there? Are
in
you a
that book,
fan?
I love Rod Dreher in general. I've read everything pretty much that he's written. Um,
Uh-huh.
I'm a big Dreher fan. The Benedict Option's pretty interesting to me, especially, um, it's an older book now. I mean, it will at least like a decade or so, I think. But he's making that case for those watching or listening who may not know about Dreher's book. Sort of making a case not to Christians retreat, but that given sort of the climate that we live in, that we begin to network better, right? And we build our own schools, and we homeschool, and we engage in shopping at Christian businesses, and all these other things, sort of just crafting a Christian culture,
Yeah,
right? And I think I think you're talking about the things that count, the ethics, and the distinctives in some way, those only come by being intentional about doing some of the things that Dreyer suggests in there. I guess
uh-huh,
the word I'm landing on is intentionality. Being intentional about this, and um, having been in the classical Christian movement, classical Christian education for over a decade, I think that is one of the great distinctives about that movement. Focusing on things like great books. You know,
sure.
attempting to integrate faith and learning. An emphasis on languages, and there's been in my opinion, I'm a Greek scholar, I'm a language scholar, linguist, but focus mainly on Greek. I wish there was more focus on Greek than Latin, but I understand too, uh, you know, why Latin is so important in that movement. As a former Latin teacher myself, but I I do think like those distinctives that you're talking about are important, and you're saying you draw on you hire people from like Patrick Henry and Hillsdale because the ethics, you know, the
Hmm.
curriculum that has helped shape them, you know, the professors that have helped shape them. Um, yeah, so I don't know, man. When I look at the sort of trends in education, I'm hoping the classical movement will not cave, um, will not cave to AI, will not cave to sort of uh, some of the ideological movements we're seeing. That it'll stand firm and continue to find ways to bring the past into the present and say, hey, this is really valuable. This is something we're not willing to give up.
Yeah, yeah, love that.
So I don't know. I just talked a lot. I was kind of rambling there for a minute, but um, I don't know. I'm a bit enamored with higher education at the moment, but also just K through 12 education, especially high school.
Yeah.
We're seeing. I think
Now,
we're
Michael,
seeing.
do you feel like, I mean, in the years you've been a
Yeah.
professor, do you feel like you've seen a big shift in the kind of students coming in?
Um, I've seen
Are they
I've
more
seen a
anxious, less
difference
prepared?
in. Yeah. I think so. I think work ethic is something that's definitely changed over the years. So, for instance, I've been teaching some online classes, and this is mind blowing to me. I have students who sign up for online degrees, like to do their whole 4 years online, right? They enroll in an online program, and then they moan and complain and some other things that other words I could use. Um, they moan and complain that there are actually live class components to an online degree, you
Hmm.
know. And I'm thinking, and so at the end of the semester, when there's the evaluations, I haven't had a semester yet where there's not been a student complaining about that. I signed up for an online degree program. Why should I have to sit in these classes? And it's just the work ethic, the level of work ethic has, I think, changed.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Yeah, I've been hearing the same thing, and then also just that professors increasingly feel like they've just got to kind of tiptoe around very, very sensitive students as well.
That's definitely an issue. So at a school that I have a budding relationship with, I haven't made it very clear. This is where I stand. I'm not doing the coddling. Um, I will speak truth, and I will lean into that just as much as I will the goodness and beauty, and But I'm not going to. This sounds bad. It's not that I'm not going to watch my words. I'm not trying to be like you know, just provocative, like a provocateur for the heck of it. But also, when hard questions get asked by students and hard topics come up, I'm not going to skirt. I'm not going to tiptoe. And if that becomes a problem down the line, then it becomes a problem. But I'm letting you know up front that's where I stand, and that's how it is.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
you know, um, you know, take from that what you will, but I I feel like the the worry, and this is especially in like bigger secular universities, that professors. I've taught at the University of Kentucky, and this was right on the I was teaching there right at the time when the pronoun thing became a thing.
Hmm.
Okay.
Yep.
um and I had students and colleagues. I had a female colleague who was teaching humanities course, same humanities course I was teaching, just different students, and this pronoun thing was happening, or name preference thing. And there was one student, for example, that when it the very first class of semester said, um when the teacher was asking about name preference, whatever, the student said uh he didn't want to be called like Jonathan. Instead, his name for the semester would be my lord.
Hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
so every time this female professor called on him, she had to address him as my lord.
That is hilarious. That is awesome.
And this is a true story. Like, this really happened.
Yeah.
You know, at the University of Kentucky. This really truly
Now, was
happened.
this kid was being a smartass and just kind of, is that
No, he was trolling the system essentially, but
okay?
was insisting that that's what he be called. And so, my policy at the secular university level like that became, I'm not fooling around with that. I will call you by your last name, you know.
Yep. Okay.
Um, and that became like an easy workaround for me. So I'm not calling you anything. I will address you by last name. Um, but I through that, uh, I still was able to address every student by their first name. But they knew, like, from the start, when that was my position, that there was no trolling me. I'm not playing that game. If you want to try to play that game, I'll just call you by your last name. You're not going to force me to play the pronoun game or any other game like that.
Yep.
I'm not going there. But man, I think why the education, especially higher education, is just a wild, wild west right now. Um, and yeah, I'm thankful for people like Jonathan Haidt and um, even Adam Carolla and Dennis Prager and others
Yep.
who are really really pushing back against the whole safe space movement and the coddling of the American mind, and um, the whole politicizing of education and making it ideologically driven. Um, I'm thankful for that, and in my own ways, I'm trying to do that as well. Um, and and it seems like what you're doing here with the standardized testing is, in a way, doing that as well. It's a pushback against some of these sorts of things. Um, I could be wrong. You can speak to that better than I can, but just
Yep.
poking around your site, and looking at who you have involved, it certainly seems like there's pushback there that you guys are all about.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh no, there is. I mean, I think I look at it this way, that there's basically four big levers that really end up controlling so much of mainstream education. Standardized testing is one of those levers, right? And the super crass way to put it, I think, is that whoever controls standardized testing in many ways is going to end up controlling education. But teacher
Right.
certification, right? That's a huge way. If a teacher can't be certified unless they go and ingest all the garbage in the ed schools, that's a major kind of control mechanism, right? The control of public
Yes.
funds. This is massive. That I've got 6 kids, and I pay a lot of money to support schools that I don't send my kids to, right? And I still have
Right.
to pay full price to send them to the classical Catholic schools of my choice. I view that as a profound injustice. Even the United Nations, in their own founding documents, the rights of parents to choose an education for their children is supposed to be an enshrined right, right? That most developed nations are completely ignoring right now. That, and I think you could add to that list the accreditation of schools, right? Who gets to say what is and what isn't a school, right? And we have given the federal government already way more power than the founders ever intended for the government to have in the sphere of education. I think one of the reasons they were quiet on the matter is because they viewed education in many ways as religion, right? They knew they
Mhm.
were talking about the dissemination of truth, the formation of the human person. The Christian understanding of education is very similar to Christian sanctification. It's not
Yeah.
something the federal government should have
Mm.
its hands in at all.
Hmm. Wow. Um, well, interesting stuff, man. It's been good to connect with you and learn about what you're doing. I guess as we sort of start to wrap up here, any other thoughts I'll throw your website up onto the screen here, so that people can get a look at it. But any thoughts, any resources you want to point people to, anything like that as we start to wrap up?
Yeah, our website again is cltexam.com, cltexam.com. Check it out. Check out the author bank on our website as well. Really, we believe this is the best of what has been thought and said. So check us out. And Michael Halcomb, great to be on as a guest. My understanding is this podcast is blowing up right now, so it's exciting
Yeah.
to be a guest during this fun time for you as well. So congrats on all the great work, man.
Yeah, man, I appreciate that. Yeah, I look forward to keeping up with what you're doing. Maybe we'll have you back on at some point and have a check in and see how things are going. But yeah, I appreciate you coming on, Jeremy, and best to you, man, and all you're doing. Keep up the good work, and yeah, for those of you watching or listening, check out the Proof Text podcast. Check out Glows House TV, glowshouse.com, and check out cltexam.com and the author bank there that we are just saying. We're going to stop here, friends, and we're going to stop here and say we hope that helps.
Interested in growing your ancient language skills but not sure where to start? Glows House can help. From illustrated readers and short stories to lexicons and grammars, Glows House offers a variety of resources for beginning, intermediate, and experienced ancient language learners. Head to glowsahouse.com today. Glows House, language resources for the global community.